Hi everyone, welcome to the second chapter of this course where we'll be talking about the hanging pawns structure. And this chapter will be divided into two parts. The first part is going to be about the c3, d4 hanging pawns, and then in the second part we'll discuss about the c4 and d4 hanging pawns. This structure is very similar to the Isolani, and one of the reasons is that oftentimes we first of all get the Isolani structure, and then at some point our opponent takes on c3. We capture with the b pawn, and there we have the hanging pawns on c3 and d4. The two structures are quite similar, so first of all, let's compare this structure with the Isolani. As advantages, now the d4 pawn is better protected with the pawn on c3, and now the knight from f3 is more free to do active ideas such as knight e5 or knight g5, because it no longer needs to protect the d4 pawn. Another idea is that a heavy piece on the third rank, like for example rook e1, rook e3, would both defend the base of the pawn chain, and also would contribute to our kingside attack. For example, rook e3 to h3. We can do the same with the move queen d3 and then transfer the queen to some square like h3. At any point, this structure can transform itself into a c4, d4 hanging pawns, but this would be the main discussion of the second part. And now, since the pawn from the b file has disappeared and moved to the c file, we have a semi-open b file where we can put pressure with our rook and eventually even activate the rook through the b file and maneuver it towards the king side. As disadvantages, we have now another target for our opponent. On the semi-open c file, black can put pressure on c3. We have two weak squares, d5 and c4, that our opponent can take advantage of. And now the d4, d5 break is no longer available that often, because we don't have a knight on c3 anymore to support this push. And speaking about plans for both sides, in this case the plans are, as I said, similar to the Isolani plans. So for example, we have the kingside attack. Once again, we have the bishop and queen battery on this diagonal. We have the rook lift. We have knight e5 or even knight g5, because in this structure another idea is to push h4 and support the move knight to g5. That creates pressure, additional pressure on h7 and f7. And once again, as I mentioned before, we have the additional idea of rook b1, rook b5, and rook h5 or rook g5 to support our kingside attack. Speaking about the side that plays against the hanging pawns, he would definitely like to put pressure on c3 so that he would be able to take it. We would like to occupy these squares, c4 and d5, to prevent the pawns from being pushed. We have two pawn breaks because we would like to destroy this pawn chain. So we have the e6, e5 break, and we have the b5, b4 break. We want to separate those pawns because this way they will be much easier to be attacked. And definitely, as in the Isolani, black would like to trade pieces off because he's lacking space, and those pawns are definitely becoming much weaker as we get towards an endgame. All right, now let's jump to the examples, and we will begin with a game played between Portish and Bagirov. We have a pan of transposition, and if you remember from the first chapter, this is the way we had our first couple of examples in the Isolani. It was completely the same position. That's why I was saying that these structures are pretty similar. And after short castle, rook e1, knight c to b4. In the Isolani, we were used to the move knight to f6, preparing knight b4, knight d5. This time, black chose to go knight b4 immediately, bishop b1, bishop d7, a3, takes, knight d5, and now the move queen to d3. He creates the battery, and at the same time he protects the c3 pawn. Knight to f6, knight to e5, rook to c8. And at this point, there are several ways that white can continue his play. For example, he can play something like bishop g5 to put pressure on f6, provoke black to play the move g6, and then we can play the move bishop h6 with tempo, rook e8, and then the typical maneuver of the bishop. Once black plays g6, we can once again consider maneuvering the bishop to the other diagonal, as we did in the Isolani structure, so we can improve the pressure and maybe, why not, support the d4 d5 push. In the game, white chose a very interesting plan, a nice maneuver that it would be important that you keep in mind. He played the move rook a2. His idea is to bring the rook to the e file and increase the pressure down this file, creating ideas such as knight f7, knight d7, especially after bishop a2. The position could get very tricky for black. And after g6, that's what white did, bishop a2, rook to c7, bishop h6, and after bishop f8, bishop g5, bishop g7. Now you can pause the video if you want and try to find the best way for white to convert his advantage. And here the winning move is the move d4 to d5. Due to the pin on this diagonal and the pressure down the e file, black is unable to capture the pawn, because after e takes d5, white will play bishop f6, knight d7, and if rook e2, we have the intermediate knight takes f6, then we'll capture the rook and white will be a piece up. Black played queen to c8, and now after queen f3, there is a huge pressure happening on the f file, knight d5, queen f7, king h8, and after knight to g6, black resigned, because after h takes, rook e4, this is game over. All right. Second game, we have Queen's Gambit declined, knight c3, and we got into the Tarrasch defense, cd5, and black decided to capture with the knight, e3, knight c6, and this time bishop c4, cd4, ad4, bishop e7, short castle, and at this point white went back with the bishop on d3. We definitely have a tempo loss after bishop c4 and then bishop d3 back, but we will see that the position is still fine. White is still having a nice position. Knight c3, bc3, b6, rook e1, and now the move bishop b7. And at this point we will see another typical idea that I mentioned at the beginning, and the idea that white chose in the game is the h2 h4 push. Apparently this pawn is not defended well, and black has the option of taking it, but this would be a mistake, because after knight takes h4, queen takes h4, rook e3, white will have a very strong pressure on the king side. We are threatening rook h3, so for example black can play g6 to defend against that, but after rook g3, threatening bishop g5 to trap the queen, let's say queen e7, now we have different ideas such as bishop g5, queen g4, queen h4, maybe bishop f6, maybe rook h3. So definitely white has much more than only compensation for the sacrificed pawn. So most of the times black is unable to capture this pawn, so keep in mind that this is a serious possibility to begin our attack. Black played knight a5, knight g5, h6, and now another nice attacking idea, the move queen to h5. Bishop d5, and after knight h7, rook e8. Here you can find the winning move on your own. White took on h6, pawn takes, queen takes, f5, and now there are several ways to finish off this game. White decided to play the most natural one, rook e3, followed by rook g3, but even a rook sacrifice on e6 would lead to a winning position. Takes, takes. If king h8, we have queen h6, king g8, and bishop f5, and that's it. Bishop e6 is coming. But he decided to go rook e3, bishop h4, and now another nice attacking idea, rook to g3. His point is to decoy the bishop from protecting the f6 square, so that he can use it with his knight, threatening queen to h7 and queen to h6. Bishop h2, king h1, queen f6, queen f6, king g8, king h2, and the game is over. All right. Next example. We have a very similar position as before, where white chose the move queen to d3. And at this point, black has two options. He can play knight f6 or he can play g6. In the game, he chose to play knight to f6, but for example, if g6 would have happened, then one of the ideas that we can play is to go c4, knight f6, bishop h6, rook e8, and now once again the bishop maneuver to a2, and at this point d5 is going to become a really serious candidate move. White is much better in this position. So he chose to play knight f6, and now white went for the move queen to h3. As we said in the beginning, this is one of the ideas that white has. He can maneuver the queen from d3 to h3 to keep supporting c3 and as well as attacking h7. And now with the queen on h3, there are additional ideas on e6. For example, if at some point the rook leaves the f8 square, we can even think about knight takes f7 sacrifice, followed by queen to e6. Rook e8. For now, knight f7 is not that good. Bishop g5 was played, and now black chose the move h6. You can ask yourself, what should white do here in order to continue the attack? And the best move is to sacrifice the bishop on h6, ga6. But at this point, it's very important how we continue our attack. Taking here on h6 is not ideal, because we give black time to defend with moves like bishop f8, for example. So we need to bring extra pieces into the attack, and that's why the best move is rook to e3. h5, and now rook g3, king f8, and a very powerful move, bishop to g6, that finishes off the game, because if black takes on g6, we have the move queen to e6, and otherwise the attack is too strong on f7. We can also take on h5 and open up the h-file to continue the attack this way. We can take with the knight on f7, so too many threats that black would not be able to parry all of them. All right. This is more or less about the attacking ideas from the side that owns the hanging c3 and d4 pawns. Now let's talk about the side that attacks those pawns. And this time we have a situation where black has hanging pawns, c6 and d5, and we should be thinking about the plans that I mentioned in the beginning. So we have the pawn breaks, we have the pressure on c6, we have to occupy these squares, and we should be looking to trade pieces off to get the game towards an endgame. In this position, there are many ideas that work quite well for white. I think the best one would be to play knight a4 to offer the bishop trade, especially since that's the complementary bishop. And then afterwards we're going to occupy these squares. But in the game, white chose to do something different. He went for rook e1, h3, rook d1, and now he played the e2 e4 pawn break. He definitely wants to separate those pawns, and black has two main choices. He can take on e4, or he can push d4. If he pushes d4, the knight will go to e2, and now we have a couple of ideas. For example, if c5, we can go knight f4 with ideas like knight d3, f4, f5, e5, and so on. We can even play knight h5 instead of knight d3, and then to play f4. And white's position is quite comfortable. Black chose to play d takes e4, knight takes e4, bishop takes b2, queen takes b2, and now after bishop d5, the best plan for white is to go queen to c2 with two main reasons. One is to put the queen on c5 to start attacking both pawns, and maybe later on we can bring the rook towards the a file to increase the pressure on the a7 weakness. And another idea about the move queen c2 is that we can play, for example, knight to g5 to create some attacking ideas over there. All right, let's see the next example. This time we will talk about the plans from Black's point of view. Here Black played rook c8, attacking the weakness on c3. White defended by playing rook d3, a typical move that we already discussed about. And now Black went for the move knight to d5, which is a very logical approach, as the knight was far away from the king side, and we know that when our opponent is attacking our king's position, we should be able to have a knight near our king, because the knight is a good defender in this case. Bishop d2, defending c3, now knight f6, and rook h3. Once again, maybe it would be a good moment that you pause the video and ask yourself what's the best move for Black. Try to think about the plans that we mentioned at the beginning. The best move here for Black is to play b4 to destroy the pawn chain. After c takes b4, we definitely capture the d4 pawn. White decided to go rook d1, pawn takes, bishop takes, knight d5, and after bishop d2, bishop g5, we have a very nice position as Black. For example, if rook g3, we can take on d2, queen d2, queen h4. Black can easily defend against White's kingside attack, and Black's pieces became quite active. We have a strong bishop on b7, a strong rook on the c file. We might bring the f rook to the d8 square to put pressure on d4, and we should consider this position to be quite comfortable for Black. All right, and one more thing that I would like to show you in this structure is this sort of position. We got an endgame where Black has complete domination on light squares, and you should keep in mind that the inclusion of the move b5 is quite important in this structure, because we control the c4 and a4 squares, and in this case it would be much easier for us to take advantage of those squares. As we can see black used maneuvers like rook c4, rook a4, rook a5, and then the other rook went to a4 to increase the pressure on a3, which is probably the main weakness in this position. And this definitely happens, especially when we manage to get rid of the complementary bishop. So once we do that, we should be thinking about playing on light squares. Speaking about this endgame, we'll see that we have our main pieces attacking a3, but for now it's not enough. We need to somehow include the move b5, b4 in order to be able to increase the pressure on a3. But because of the c3 pawn, we cannot do that yet. That's why we would like to try to get rid of it. And black played the move f6, bishop to c1, and now the move e5. After takes, if pawn takes e5, after bishop e5, we have great pressure on these two weaknesses. We have also the option of playing rook g4, and yeah, as we can see, this is a winning endgame already. And if he decides to keep the tension and, for example, plays bishop b2, now we can take on d4, and finally we've managed to get rid of the c3 pawn, and the b5 b4 break arrives, and now the game is over. All right, this is about the c3 d4 hanging pawn structure. We'll see each other in part 2, when we'll discuss about c4 d4 hanging pawns, and we'll see how we have maybe small differences between the structure we covered here and the following structure.